I am so conservative.
Rationalized in my head. These are things I read in
And
the
I'm going to talk about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had invited...
remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah. I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative.
Welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is just a bit of a trigger warning for those who think that words are more injurious than sticks and stones. I really am so conservative, I can't turn left even when I'm driving. In addition to giving trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection.
Yes, we do.
Alex Newman and Carl Teichrib join us to look at the goals of the UN in Davos. One world government, religion, and economy. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher remains to be Ron Hensel. And here is Ronnie Baby.
I like the way you talk about my remains. Greetings from this choose what to share window looks different, Don. Did you notice? It's like I've got a whole bunch of stuff I don't even know. Well,
pick something and share.
Pick something. Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came out, saw its shadow. Now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is Carbona Grande Resorts and Spas, the investment opportunity of the new climate world order. It's so good we show it twice. Our regular legal disclaimer, our guests on today's webcast, insert names here, that would be Alex Newman and Carl Teichrib, have no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. This satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall into the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. Notice the opinions expressed on this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy it or if it really annoys you and you want to inflict it on somebody else to ensure your continued access, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And never fear, this webcast is Y2K compliant. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. Here is where we produce the fake applause.
Fake applause.
We are too cheap for real fake applause.
Right. And so Ron is really trying to get you to come up off the dollars for that, but I just don't.
We're going to have a campaign so that I can get fake applause.
I live on a missionary budget, so that means
Alex,
no paid for.
Now, I just want everybody to know this is not a picture of Stephen Bishop from the 1980s. This is Alex Newman.
I don't even know who that is, but it's hilarious.
He's not going to sing on and on. It's not going to happen. Okay. But you probably could if you wanted to.
You wouldn't want to hear that.
Well, can you at least do save it for a rainy day? Or you can't do that. Okay. Yeah. So I had to lend him those glasses. I still have them. Everything comes back. Everything. All the styles that I grew up with and we had as a young adult.
Yeah. Well, that's the way you hold on to them. And you pointed out in your intro, we take no responsibility for anyone's opinions about our satire. And that's because, frankly, we don't care about your opinions.
That is absolutely true.
Absolutely true. Yeah. So, Alex Newman, I see you have your Liberty Sentinel sign in the back there. And you write for more than one source like that. Who is it that you write for? Why don't you tell us all about that first?
It's a long list. I serve as senior editor and foreign correspondent at the New American magazine. Actually, I think one of the subjects we're going to be talking about today was the subject of a recent cover story I did, the UN's New World Religion. I went over to the UN Climate Clown Show in Egypt a couple months ago, where they unveiled the new 10 Commandments. And then, I write for my own libertysentinel.org. I write regularly for a lot of other publications, including the Epoch Times, Law Enforcement Intelligence Brief, which goes out to every police chief and sheriff in the nation, the Illinois Family Institute, WorldNet Daily, and I got an article going in George Magazine that I just finished yesterday. Over my career, I've probably written for 30 or 40 magazines and newspapers, maybe more.
Did you say George Magazine?
George Magazine, yep, the resurrected George Magazine. Of course, JFK Jr. had George Magazine,
right.
And now
it's died.
Yeah, he did, but it's been reestablished. So fascinating.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Yep.
And Carl is one of our sort of partners in crime. His website is Forcing Change, which I highly recommend going there as well. And his book, Game of Gods, is one that we promote a lot. Even though it was written a few years ago, it is just as up to date today because things have not, how do I want to phrase this? Haven't changed. He's just become more clear. Yeah, that would be the word.
Yeah.
What he was trying to accomplish is becoming more accomplished, which is partly what intrigued me about Alex's article. I'm going to share the first two paragraphs, if I can remember how to do. Oh, yeah, there we go. Share screen. There we go. I'm going to share this screen.
It changed our interface a little bit, guys, so we're kind of like...
Entire screen. There we go. Okay, now we got it. Okay, there we go. The UN's New World Religion is the title of the article. Faith leaders of the world unite. This was the message of self-styled representatives of major religions gathered on the Sinai Peninsula for the United Nations Climate Summit, a historic event infused with pagan and New Age spirituality from the moment attendees got off their CO2 spewing airplanes. Imagine that. The religious nature of the UN Conference of the Parties 27 was embedded into the practically everything. Giant posters reading, "Welcome to Egypt, the dawn of conscience." I didn't realize that was where conscience began, but featuring the Egyptian sun god symbols on the official COP27 logo, greeted travelers arriving at the airport. In the center of the posters was a bizarre message from, quote, the declaration of innocence before being judged before the scale of Mot and entering the afterlife, end quote. A pagan Egyptian document supposedly written more than 4,000 years ago. It included, among other messages about sin, quote, "I have not polluted the water or the earth."
Let me get this straight. Where was this?
Well, the conference was held in an Egyptian resort town on the Red Sea called Sharm el Sheikh, which is a very strange town. Normal Egyptians aren't allowed in. They need a special.
Normal, only abnormal Egyptians.
Right? Yeah, they have to be special and pre-qualified. The whole city is ringed around with a giant wall, and you can only go in if you have official permission. It's all very artificial and strange.
Now, if the Taliban had their way, they would have, of course, demolished the pyramids and the Sphinx and everything, right? But still, at some level, I think wouldn't your typical average everyday Muslim, even though they're not like radical, wouldn't they be a little bit offended at all this elevation of Egyptian gods?
You would think they would. That's one of the things that struck me as so bizarre about this whole event. Where did they find all these self-proclaimed Christian leaders and all these self-proclaimed Islamic leaders and all these self-proclaimed Jewish leaders who are so willing to hop into bed with self-professed proud pagans who are worshiping, what the Bible describes as demons? I don't know, but they found a whole lot of them. They flew them in from all over the world, and they marched up Mount Sinai, and they unveiled the new 10 Commandments after their strange climate repentance ceremony, and all over. The whole country of Egypt was just plastered with all these pagan symbols for the UN COP27. And yeah, you'd think that makes some Muslims mad, but it's such a police state. I can't tell you how many times I showed my papers. Probably more times in the week and a half I was there than I've showed in my entire life before that. So maybe it's just so totalitarian that nobody could do anything bad if they wanted to. I don't know.
Or
Well-
they just, is it maybe just because you're an American or what?
No, maybe it was because there were so many high-powered and highfalutin foreigners in town, but I do understand that they've got these security checkpoints everywhere, right? You're driving on the road, security checkpoint, security checkpoint. You want to go into a mall, security checkpoint. You go through the metal detector. I mean, every time you're going somewhere, you're going through the whole ritual. They're going to feel up your legs, and I mean, it's and I've been to many countries in the Middle East.
Now,
I've
Joe
never
Biden
seen
would like
anything
that
this
part, by
intense.
the way.
Oh, absolutely! If you could sniff too, right? Especially if there was young people around. That's crazy.
Well, I want to jump in a second on where did they get these people? That's a great question. Carl and I think, can answer that one because we have been going to the Parliament of the World's Religions for a long time. We didn't go the original one. That was 1893. That's just a few years ahead of my time. Not many, but a few. But we went to the second one in 1993 in Chicago. And the history of that is this. George Muller, who was the Undersecretary of the UN for, I think, 40 years, really wanted the UN to become the one world government. And he came to the realization that you can't have a one world government without a one world religion. How do we facilitate that? And he landed on the idea of redoing the Parliament of the World's Religions. And then you will have people from all over the world coming together in peace and harmony and love and whatever. And they created a global ethic. And at that event, you had virtually every religion in the world represented in one location. It was, for me and those of us who are about 12 of us that went together, an evangelistic opportunity of a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
But you had everyone there wanting to be included in this huge international event.
Inclusivity.
All coming together. The only ones not invited were conservatives, but we crashed their party anyway.
Yeah, diversity, equity, inclusion never includes.
Never.
It's not that. Don't be crazy now. Don't go crazy with the diversity.
Right. So the Parliament has already been shaping. Many of the people are probably were the event that you just attended.
Yeah, and there are several of these organizations that are directly supported by the UN. One that I've focused in on over the last few years is called Religions for Peace. And obviously the Vatican is a big part of this. They've got all kinds of alleged evangelical leaders who are very, very open to this. You've got Orthodox leaders, you've got Jewish, Islamic, Hindu, all the rest of them. And this is an organization that's funded by the UN, by multiple UN agencies. It's funded by the U.S. State Department. It's funded by George Soros. It's funded by the Rockefeller group of philanthropies and foundations. And in 2019, they met in Germany. I think this was the 10th annual or the 10th Religions for Peace Summit. And they came up with this declaration, and they formed what they described as an alliance of virtue. They're like, we all kind of have the same virtues. We all kind of believe the same thing. And they all committed, by the way. They came up with a final declaration. They all committed to human development, in their terms, as defined by the UN Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, which UN leaders very frequently refer to as the master plan for humanity. So, to the extent that there are Christians participating in this, if they are truly on board with this, this is apostasy. This is totally unbiblical. And, there are plenty of biblical warnings about this, but it is very troubling. And you see this in UNESCO. You see this in the stuff that they're pushing in the schools now, the one world kind of new age spirituality. You mentioned Robert Mueller. He's the guy, of course, who came up with the World Core Curriculum, which he said needs to be taught in all the schools of the world. And then in the teacher's manual, in the forward to the teacher's manual, he drops this nuclear bombshell. He says, by the way, this is all based on the teachings of Alice Bailey and the Tibetan teacher Jewel Kuhl, right? The founder of the Lucifer Publishing Company and her demon, right? You can't make this stuff up.
But,
So she claimed to be communicating with this demon that was channeling this information through her. And she's got all these crazy books about education in the new age. We got to get rid of the heresy of separateness, right? That's us. We don't want to be part of your system. We want to be apart from it. So very interesting.
Might be apostate and unbiblical, but at least it's winsome. That is the new thing. I mean, that's the new orthodoxy is, winsomeness.
Well, it is. And unfortunately, just to kind of skip one thing here, I want to talk about the church in general, because we talked before we started here on the Enneagram. One of the core issues of the Enneagram, promoted by Richard Rohr, who kind of trained the Enneagram masters, is perennialism, the idea that all religions have the same view, have the same God at the core. And so we have to get over this idea of two-ness, of separateness, and just all joined together. And rather than trying to convert a Buddhist, for example, to Christianity, we just need to encourage them to be the best Buddhist they can.
But how can you have diversity without separateness?
Well,
Don't confuse them with
strive for
facts, Ron.
diversity.
Right.
You strive for
Logic. That's
oneness.
white supremacy. This thing about
Oh,
logic.
yeah,
and things having to be consistent. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's white logic again. Yeah, I'm white-splaining. No, wait a minute.
And mansplaining. That's two
Maybe
strikes
I'm-
right there.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm not actually explaining. I'm asking. So white asking? I don't know. Okay.
White asking.
So
And Carl has been watching Davos at the same time. So they're working for, what is Davos trying to accomplish besides having us eat crickets and stuff?
I would just simply control the world. We can just say it that way. You can't get a better looking supervillain than what you've got in Klaus Schwab's. I mean, my word, that's wild. Where does he get half his get-ups? You know, his costuming. I don't know. He needs different advisors. Nevertheless, you know, it's a really interesting interplay between religion and politics, because what it essentially does, and the World Economic Forum, people need to understand, is an ecosystem. It's not just a singular organization. It's really an ecosystem that bridges the international community, major corporations, faith groups. It bridges the banking institutions, central banks, the non-governmental organizational side of it, and it kind of is like, let's call it the town hall for the world. It becomes the action-oriented outreach of what the United Nations has been working for so
I mean,
long.
when you say town hall for the world, you really mean the elites of the world, right?
Yes, those who can afford to fly in with their private jets and, you know, spend their carbon credits on aviation fuel.
I still haven't figured out where you even buy these carbon credits.
Yeah, talk to Alex. But you know, it is a religion. It is, and that's something that people, I think, have a hard time grasping. This isn't just politics. It is on its own merit a faith. And you know, one of the good examples of this was at the Parliament of World Religions back in 2018, where Larry Greenfield, at the end of the Parliament, was saying, thank you for engaging in the salvation of the world. And this is a salvation message. What we are doing is saving the planet. I like the fact that Alex, you guys brought in Robert Mueller. I had the opportunity back in '97. My very first international event was attending the Global Citizenship 2000 Youth Congress, and Robert Mueller was our patron and you know, the kind of the rock star of the whole show. And at the end of this, you know, spending 3 days rubbing shoulders with him, one of the little groups I was with, sitting around the table, talked about how what we were now experiencing was really a type of new outlook, a new spiritual outlook, and that's the real virus. And that's how it was, how this one individual described it: make it a virus, no inoculation, infect everyone. And to the point of why religious leaders. In 2010, I had the opportunity of going to the World Religion Summit, which was parallel to the G8 and G20. And Alex, you'll understand this completely in terms of it's understood that religious leaders are the new statesmen for today, because they transcend national boundaries already.
Right.
And so they're brought to the table as statesmen, planetary statesmen, and it feels good. It's like, thumbs up, I'm part of the club. And so there's this understanding that if you want to reach the world, you need to go beyond national borders. Who does that better?
Right.
Religion.
So back to Alex. Your article is talking about it being a new world religion, and it's based on, and this has come up in several parts of our discussion here, the idea of climate change. Now, you mentioned they have the new 10 commandments. We probably should lay out, okay, what are those 10 commandments? But before I do that, I want to point out, at least in my view, and I think you all agree with this, that the tool of climate change isn't about trying to control the environment, but is simply a scare tool to have people willingly give these elites the power over their lives. Would you agree with that?
No question about it, Don. And actually, I just wrote a major column for the Epic Times proving, without any science at all, that the leaders of this cult do not believe the nonsense that they expect us to believe, right? That your sins are your carbon emissions. Did you eat too much steak? Did you not ride your bicycle? You rode on an airplane and you didn't give Al Gore money for carbon credits, things like that.
Too much flatulence.
Right, yeah, or your cow having too much flatulence, right? So those are your sins. But don't worry, you can have redemption, right? You just have to repent of your climate sins, and you have to buy more carbon credits, and you have to eat the bugs, as Klaus Schwab would say. And there's this whole elaborate system of theology that goes along with this cult. But the leaders don't believe it. And I want to go back to something that Carl said that I think is so critical to understanding what's going on here. Peter Drucker, kind of an elite guy, predator class, very clearly. And, his cover story, I guess, was that he was a management guru. Okay, so that was his cover story in life. And he came up with this idea that you needed to bring about major global changes, that you needed what he described as a three-legged stool. And so the first leg of the stool, he said, is the public sector, the governments of the world. And so you have the United Nations bringing together all of the governments of the world, every mass murdering dictator, everybody who has managed to control a piece of land, a territory, comes together. So that's all the governments of the world. Then you bring together the second leg of the stool, which Drucker said was the private sector, the companies. Who does that? Well, the World Economic Forum does that, right? So they bring together the Fortune 1000, the CEOs, and Klaus Schwab, on behalf of the World Economic Forum, actually signed a strategic partnership agreement with the UN to advance what they describe as Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the head of the UN General Assembly, when these were being approved, described this as the master plan for humanity. Okay, so you've got the businesses of the world, the governments of the world all on board. The Pope was actually there to officiate at the ceremony. This was in 2015. Obama couldn't get enough of it. The mass murdering Marxist dictator of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, said this was going to usher in a brave new world, and he used that in a good sense. And then you have the third leg of the stool. That is, as Peter Drucker explained, the social sector or religion. And so I mentioned earlier, Religions for Peace, this UN-backed global alliance of all the religions of the world. They claim to represent like 7 billion people. If you look at the last final declaration that they signed, they specifically say in there, as I mentioned, we commit to human development as set forth in the UN Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the climate cult basically underpins Agenda 2030. The whole concept of sustainability depends on the fraudulent hypothesis that CO2 is a pollution that's going to destroy us unless we pay more tithes to the United Nations. So you bring all of these together, you've got this stool, just as Drucker described it, the religions, the businesses, and the governments. And what do you get? This master plan for humanity, Agenda 2030, with climate at its core, that requires abandoning biblical principles, biblical morality. And when you really dig down, I mean, and you don't have to do a lot of research to come to this obvious conclusion, what we're talking about is an inversion of biblical principles, an inversion of the morality that God gave us, that he wrote into our hearts, and of course that he actually gave us physically, starting with the very first command, right? You go back to the very, very beginning, open up Genesis, and you see the very first command that God gave to mankind was be fruitful and multiply. And so when you go to all these UN conferences, what do they say? Stop having babies. Babies are terrible. The earth is groaning because of your babies. And it's interesting. I mentioned Religions for Peace. The lady that they just put in charge of this, I can give you her name. It's Azza Karam. She's the new head of Religions for Peace. Before going to work for Religions for Peace, she actually worked at the UN Population Fund. Isn't that just such an interesting coincidence? And you have plenty of others as well. One of the other major figures who's actually now running the or who was running until he passed away recently, the UN UNESCO Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Peace and Sustainable Development in Education. The chairman of the board of that operation was actually a self-proclaimed population control zealot. I'm going to give you I'm serious. I'm going to give you his name. He was the Minister of Family Planning in the Indira Gandhi regime. His name was Dr. Karam Singh. And he was the Minister of Family Planning during Indira Gandhi. Those are the ones who sterilized 15 million people.
I heard that India just passed China in population.
Yep. And they're obsessed with getting rid of all those people.
Not doing too well. You know, I think I foresee in the future that they're going to create some kind of mecca for all this. And I think it should be in East Palestine, Ohio. I think that would be the ideal place because it's low population, you know, already, and we can see our future there. You know, we can see how they're going to treat us, how they're going to treat people.
Sure. So, and I noticed, Alex, that you quoted our friend Dr. Cal Beisner in your article. They've done some great work on this whole issue of climate change, which we want to acknowledge that the climate does change, but the climate has always changed. That's just part of the creation model. The earth warms up, it cools down, the sun does what it does. And
we have documentary evidence. And
the Vikings used to farm on Greenland 1,000 years ago, for crying out loud.
They grew grapes in Newfoundland.
Yeah. I mean, to somehow think that humans are the thermostat of the planet is just hubris at its greatest. You know, put this in a picture, kind of a thing. It's just crazy stuff. So, okay. So, what are the 10 Commandments that we need to be concerned about?
Well, I mean, if you read them, they actually put out several versions of the 10 Commandments. Mostly it's gobbledygook, you know, open your heart and open your mind, which is, you know, meaningless drivel. But as you read them, you will see some real clear pantheism, some real clear paganism. You know, I can give you a few, right? One is creation is not our possession. We recognize human responsibility to love nature. Creation is not simply external to God. It is in significant ways permeated by God's presence and being. We must care for the planet. We are responsible for the well-being of all life today. And that sounds to me like Genesis 3, verse 5. Ye shall be as gods, right? You're responsible for all the life on the planet. I mean, really? So here's some other ones. Change your inner climate. Compassion means suffering and feeling the pain of the earth. Okay, so this is the kind of nonsense that these people are putting out there under the guise of new 10 Commandments.
I changed my inner climate with coffee. I drink it for your protection. So,
I don't think Al Gore will approve. Okay.
He's very fortunate not to be around me when I'm not drinking coffee. So.
Well, you know, the Parliament of World Religions, I don't know if it was the last one that was in Toronto or the one before that in Salt Lake City, but the theme was apologizing to Mom. And Mom, Mother Earth.
Mom always makes you feel guilty. So,
well, yeah, I mean, we have made Mom sick, and so they're writing letter. You could write letters to Mom, and they had a little post office box that you could drop them in to get them, so that Mom would know that we're concerned about how badly we have.
You never call, you never write.
Norma, right?
And to Alex's point, Asa Karam was keynote speaker during the 2018 and the 2015 Parliament of World Religions.
Yeah.
She was definitely a significant part of that event.
Well, Alex is going to have to leave in a couple of minutes. Should we do the commercial while he's still here?
Well, I think we should, because he's going to be. Alex Newman has other plans, and so
okay. What's going on there? Do you see that?
We need to have Ron fix that, and then we'll try again.
All I did was remove it from the stream and add it back in. I don't know what was going on. So when you see images like this, well, what do you think of? Vacation fun, relaxation, time away with family. Well, here are 2 words you should be thinking. Cha-ching. Because any day now, maybe any minute now, the Arctic beaches of North America, Greenland, Northern Europe, and Asia will all look like this, making them the investment opportunity of a lifetime. We will soon be starting on our new chain of Carbona Grande resorts and spas. Contact Blackscore Industries today for free investment prospectus at 1-800-CLIMATE. So when the rest of the world looks like this, yours can look like this. Carbona Grande Resorts and Spas. So, there's money to be made. I mean, Al Gore has, proven that. He's making lots of money.
That's for sure.
So it comes down to, Alex and Carl, it seems to me, it comes down to really three things that are trying to be accomplished. Power, that's number one. That's measured by money, number two, and that they're using the climate change story, the narrative, to accomplish those things. Would you agree with that?
I would add one more thing: spiritual purpose.
In other words, it gives people a sense of purpose. The purpose-driven planet.
That's right. Yes, you're not far off, Ron.
Drucker's disciple, right? I mean,
yeah,
good call right there.
Yeah, but it does have a spiritual component, and that is inescapable.
The planet's going to be okay. I mean, if we all die, Earth will still rotate, go around the sun, pretty much, right? But we want to give
right to Mom anyway. They won't.
We want to give the planet a purpose to keep us alive. So.
But who's going to drink the coffee if we're all gone?
Who's going to make the coffee? Right?
Okay. So in the minute or two before you decide to vamoose, what do you suggest to those who are viewing this that they should, I don't know, warn their friends about, prepare for? How can we? I would step back and say, by the way, from a biblical perspective, this is all in God's control, so I don't have to be afraid of it.
Right.
However, it seems to me that the church should be aware of what's going on in culture for the reason of discipling people into the faith and then discipling them after they're in the faith. So that's kind of my perspective on all of this. How do you approach this?
Yeah, the Apostle Paul talked about, we're not ignorant of Satan's devices. And as far as I'm concerned, this is one of Satan's devices, telling us that the gas we exhale is toxic pollution and teaching kids that it's mom and dad's fault that the planet is dying because of their CO2. I mean, this is straight from the pit of hell. And so, mom and dad, I would urge you right now, you must protect your children. Take very seriously what the Bible says about the rearing, the upbringing, the discipling, and the education of children. That's not Caesar's job. It's not even the church's job. It's actually your job. So take it real serious. I would say, before anything else, pull your children out of the government's indoctrination centers. Make sure they're getting a good Bible-centered education. Make sure you're in the Bible. Make sure you're in the Word. I do think, because the political implications of this are so serious, that as self-governing people, right? We were blessed to be born in a nation where we, the people, are technically the rulers. You need to be on your phone with your member of Congress and tell them, look, this is unacceptable. Stop destroying our economy. Stop promoting this false religion from the pit of hell. The climate is just fine. The real problem is what the UN and the rest of these people are doing. So, get yourself informed. Inform your neighbors, get involved in the political process so that we can stop it. Up until very recently, the Republicans had a pretty united front against these lies. There were virtually no Republicans who would publicly come out and say, I believe the man-made global warming hypothesis because it's ludicrous. Well, there have been a growing number of defections over the last few years to the point where there's now a conservative climate caucus up on Capitol Hill. And there's just a handful of goobers in there right now. But if this keeps growing, they're going to be able to pass all this stuff through Congress. So, folks, get on the phone, whether you live in a Republican or Democrat district, get on the phone, get together with some other people, get involved with this. But, on the spiritual component, which I think is by far the most significant, do not be deceived. God did not send you a spirit of fear. When these clowns tell you that you need to be fearful about, it used to be climate change, then it was climate crisis, then it was climate emergency. At this latest one, it was climate hell. You're not going to climate hell, okay? The only hell that you need to be concerned about is the one that is eternal, and Jesus Christ is the one who gives you the solution to that, not the United Nations, not the governments of the world. So be in your Bible, be in prayer, protect your children, and get involved.
Absolutely. All right, Alec, you have a good time at your speech, and I want to go to Carl for a moment. I want to turn to his article, if I can remember what the title is. Okay.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. We will catch up soon. God bless you.
All right. Adios. I got to go. Oh, here we go. because I linked to an article that Carl had done on his forcing change. By the way, give the website address for that if you would.
Yeah, sure. Forcingchange.org. So from 2007 to 2015, I published a monthly online magazine that took a look at those forces of change, those intellectual, political, social, and religious forces of change. So forcingchange.org is the repository of all those years, the archived back issues. If you're interested, you can go. You can just sign up. It's free. Sign up and have access to lots and lots of material.
And so one of them they want to get is the Davos Revolution and Remaking of Civilization. Why
Yes.
is that important?
Well, number one, the Davos agenda and the World Economic Forum have landed squarely in the public light in the last couple of years because of, well, what has happened with COVID. It's been around for a long time. I mean, the World Economic Forum used to be the European Management Forum, and it's been around since the 1970s. But in the last 5 years or so, and especially the last 3, the WEF has all of a sudden become a lightning rod for anti-globalization, and to take a look to see, what are the elites of the world doing? What are their talking points? What are the narratives? And for my country, Canada, it's taken on a special significance as Chrystia Freeland, my Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, literally the second in command of my country, is on the steering committee. She's on the board of the World Economic Forum. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau himself is a significant partner of the World Economic Forum, attending previous events and going through their program. And probably the person who will take his place, Mark Carney, who used to be the governor for the Bank of Canada, then sat on the board of the Bank for International Settlements and the Bank of England, and then became, I believe it was the climate envoy for the Glasgow Climate Summit back in what was that, 2021. He also is on the steering committee for the World Economic Forum. So for my country, Canada, it's pretty significant. Simply because of the level of involvement and the appearance that it takes. My government takes a lot of its talking points and narratives from the WEF, as your country does as well. Biden has, of course, very close ties to the WEF, and John Kerry, who made some pretty crazy statements at the last Davos meeting.
Right, John Kerry, not Jim Carrey, right?
That's right.
Aren't we the saviors of the world? Was that with those?
Yes. Yep. That's right. Yep. And talking about how this is almost an extraterrestrial experience, and how fortunate we are.
Every time I, see these people, it's like I'm having a close encounter. Yeah.
So I mean, it's there. You can't escape it. You can't say it's a non-issue. And to Alex's point that this is a cult, yes, it is a cult, because it has that spiritual implication, that messianic implication. I mean, my goodness, if all of a sudden you had your hometown, and I live in a little village of 200 people, but if all of a sudden in my little village we had a pseudo-Christian cult move in, Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses, whoever, and they became our school teachers, our principals, they became our mayor, they became our city department works, they basically run the show. You'd be questioning what they're pushing in terms of their worldview.
Right.
It's not much different.
Right.
Our national mayor, your national mayor, is pushing that worldview.
Pete Buttigieg? National. Mayor Pete.
Well, since we've used the word cult about this a couple of times, and the messianic nature of it, one of the marks of the cult is information control.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see anything like that going on, do we?
Oh no, especially the last 2 to 3 years. Not at all. Yeah, no censorship.
That's a good thing,
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and no use of a crisis to continually promote and push your narrative.
Right.
None of that happened.
Right.
That's conspiracy.
Yeah.
So we need to, according to the powers that be, the messianic leaders, we need to stop and prevent misinformation, which means anything that disagrees with their narrative is, by definition, misinformation.
This program, right? I mean, you're now living it. Sorry, you're not complying. So if you don't comply, you don't fit in, right?
I don't, but as you recall, right at the beginning, and you've been here enough with us that I don't care.
I know. And that's what. and gentlemen, that's why I like you guys.
Yeah.
But caring is so important because, I mean, as you well remember from the 2018 Parliament, the theme was reclaiming the heart of our humanity, working together for a world of compassion, peace, justice, and sustainability. And then the 2018 Parliament was the promise of inclusion, the power of love. I can't remember what the 2021 Parliament, the virtual one, was. Oh, golly, I should have it, but I don't. I attended the whole thing. It was quite the virtual event. And then, of course, the one coming up this summer also expresses that high moral position of compassion and that high moral position of safeguarding human dignity and human rights. And this is right. And this is what's really interesting is that
I don't know if you realize this.
Yeah.
I did submit a workshop application.
Oh, good.
Good. And the theme of it is, what is a human? Can we define what a human is so that we know which humans should have human rights?
Yes.
Well, everybody needs compassion, a climate that's never failing. And I hear those people are ready to save, saving the planet. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
So
that's okay. Actually,
Bill Hunsberg and I are going to do this workshop, and
nice.
I hope they don't bring pitchforks and pitch and burn us to death and fork us out of there. But who knows?
I'll stand in the back and watch it unfold.
And film it and then laugh. Right?
Ron, are you attending? Do you have your ticket?
No.
Okay, shoot.
I was planning to not go.
He wants to be in a safe space, and that would not.
Yeah. I don't. It's like I said. It's not so much that I want to be on the right side of history. It's I just don't want to be on the side that the fire and brimstone's going to land on.
Okay, so, I hear you.
Yeah,
I hear you. But to the point of the theme of the program, the Parliament of World Religions, Religions for Peace, United Religions Initiative, all of these. The World Congress of Faiths, all of these major interfaith movements and organizations have that tie in to the United Nations. There is this sense of we're doing the work of global governance. We're doing this work for the greater good. And it's always about this higher moral position, which is one of the reasons why you see that their language is always couched in we're working for the common good. We're working for compassion. We're working for the betterment of the world. And if there's anything that at least for myself, it has taught me is the importance of grabbing the language.
Lest we be scattered across the earth, we want to stay together,
So if you control that language, then you have that ability to shut down your opponents fairly quickly and paint them in a negative light, because obviously you don't fit the narrative. You're not compassionate. You're not.
Ron said years ago in one of the articles we were writing and working on that language is the coin of exchange in human interactions, and whoever controls the coin of exchange controls the ideas and arguments
and the values. I mean, the values. Words are, well, actually sentences technically, if you want to be, words only have meaning in sentences, really, and but it's the sentences have value. They have truth value. Mm-hmm. They're either true or false, and those truth values become they express actual values, things that are really of ultimate worth. And if you can control what people think is true, or whether it's even really important to know the truth, that's a value in itself right there. Truth is not propositional, will dictate your values. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't matter what you believe.
Well, Bill Hunsberger did something that we have used. In fact, we have an article on this that he wrote. And Carl has, because Carl has been to the Parliament with us, we all get to hang out. In fact, Carl and I, for some reason, gravitate toward the Wiccans. Bill
Yeah.
gravitates towards other groups, but I like the Wiccans. I like talking to them. I think they're interesting. Sadly, most of them grew up in Christian churches and left. But if you talk to a Wiccan and ask them, what is Wicca? They all start off with the same line. Wicca for me is, and then they'll explain it. Why do they do that? Because there is no absolute truth. So when you talk about language and truth, Ron, they don't believe there's an actual truth that we can all, salute.
The truth for me
Your
is
truth is your truth, and my truth is my truth, and they be contradictory, but they're both still true. And so a question that we use is this: is it okay to burn witches? Now they have to answer that. And very often they'll say, yes, it is because of the Wiccan Rite of 3, harm none, do as you will. And our response is this: but that's only true for you. It isn't true for me. Maybe my truth is it's okay to burn witches or beat witches or drag them down the road behind my car and then burn them and beat them, burn
now,
them.
you make sure to tell them up front that you're talking in hypotheticals, right?
You get to that point, but what we want to do is to spur the idea in their minds that there is an absolute truth, and yes, burning and beating witches is wrong and immoral from a Christian standpoint.
So do no harm. Is that what they said their
Yes.
ethic is? So they say that's true for everybody?
They want it to be, but if truth is relative, they can't really even argue that.
I mean, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the whole point of that discussion, is to demonstrate that if you want to say truth is relative, then you have to live consistently with that, which means my truth may be different than yours, and it might include harming people because it doesn't apply in all cases.
So, like, the really interesting thing here is how many grassroots, regular, everyday Americans have a clue about what's going on at the United Nations or even care about it. And the next question is, how much does what's going on in the United Nations affect them in real everyday terms? Now, I think the average person would say probably not much. What would you say, Carl?
I think I'd say more than what you realize. And here's why. So again, from my point of view, from a Canadian, I watch as my...
We won't hold that against you. Go ahead.
I realize that, yes. I realize that my Canadian foreign affairs policy is a reflection of the United Nations, that our Canada Parks Services uses Agenda 21, that I pay a carbon tax, and that comes out of the United Nations as well. And that carbon tax is that tithe and offering that I am forced to pay every time I fuel up my vehicle. If you're a farmer, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you have an issue with your DEF, your diesel injection systems that you have to it's your anti-pollution diesel cleaning system. That's a worldwide phenomenon. It didn't just happen in Missouri. It's a worldwide issue because it came out of global UN-based WEF think tank type situations. And land planning, oh my stars, land planning. So much of the land planning concept is pulled again out of those initial international agreements. So you have the United Nations comes out with pie in the sky visionary ideas, and then at the national level you have your President's Council, in your case back in the 1990s, your President's Council on Sustainable Development, and then it goes down into your state level, your provincial level, and they produce white papers and policies, and then it filters down all the way into your municipal county level, and it infuses itself in all kinds of manners and ways, especially in the realm of industry. So you don't see it, but you feel it.
But the entire time you were talking about that, the only thing I could think of was, did Justin Trudeau ever apologize for wearing blackface?
No.
So then who cares about any of this other stuff? Because all that really matters is Justin Trudeau's got to apologize for wearing blackface.
And the fact that he used the Canadian banking system against those who disagreed with him, which
Right.
is another mark against why you want a CBDC. You don't want a central bank digital currency, which comes out of the World Economic Forum. That's those concepts, those grand ideas. All of a sudden, hey, if you protest, if you're counter to the narrative, in my country,
You're a
right,
terrorist.
right. In my country, it was more than evident. We will crush you. We will cancel your banking. We will cancel your economic activity.
So to be a conservative in Canada is like what? You're kind of like
Democrats.
You're kind of like Mitt Romney, or I mean he would be like far extreme, right? He'd be far right, Mitt Romney.
He would definitely right of center in terms of the Canadian landscape. Yes.
But he'd be more than glad to sign a universal health care bill if it came along.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. We are definitely further left than America, but I mean we're culturally further left. We're a smaller country. We have a different history. We have a parallel history, but it is different. We have a parallel culture, but it is different. And we're kind of
I think
in
it's
this.
because you're closer to Russia than we are.
Well, I don't know. You got Alaska, and that's pretty much as close as you can get to Russia.
Hardly any Americans live there.
Yeah, well, hardly any Canadians live in Canada. It was minus 30 this morning. No Canadian wants to want to live in Canada, not when it's minus 30.
Well, the thing is, I forget what the thing is. I had a roommate. He was Canadian. He was from Calgary, Alberta, and we never really got it. Back in the 70s, evangelicals in this country, and probably Canada too, we just didn't talk about politics.
Right.
There were some evangelicals who didn't even believe in voting because that's the world. So we're not to be. It was so. But I remember he seemed pretty conservative, and that was before I was really educated on the differences between conservative and liberal to know enough of what it was. But what the thing that struck me as him being, we had a lot of Canadians at the Bible college I attended, because when it was founded, this college was actually in Canada, and it moved to Oak Park, Illinois, as Plymouth Brethren School called Emmaus Bible College. It's now in Dubuque, Iowa. And there's the Open Plymouth Brethren have a strong presence in Canada and the U.S. And a lot of Canadians there, but I think most of them, maybe half of them, were from Eastern Canada, and I saw a huge difference, mainly in the attitude toward the U.S. It's like the Eastern Canadians were like, it was like they were put out just being in the United States. It was like, I mean, you could tell. It's like, I said, it's like, it was like, do we really have to be here? It's like, this is America. We should be back in Canada. It's like, and the guys from Western Canada, they were the kind of people who seemed to be happy to be anywhere, really, to begin with, but they liked us. They actually liked Americans. Is that still still pretty much the way it is?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Canada is interesting. We have defined ourselves by what we're not, which is a really stupid way of doing it. And so we're not Americans. That's how Canadians define themselves. Ridiculous. Yes. What a silly way of doing it.
We're the absence of the United States.
Exactly.
It's kind of like Augustine defined evil as the absence of good. Well, we're the absence of Americanism.
Right. So what you do have is you certainly have more of an antagonistic view, especially in those Eastern, the more liberal side. But I mean, honestly, you could divide up North America, specifically Canada, the United States, a few different ways. Basically, everything Cascade Mountains to the west, from going all the way from Vancouver, British Columbia, down to San Diego. That's its own world.
Yeah. One thing I was pretty sure of, that these Eastern Canadians made me pretty sure, is that they were better than me. and I'm telling you, once the Toronto Blue Jays won the World Series, they're absolutely insufferable.
Yeah, well, I'm not a baseball guy, but hey, I don't have a lot of use for Toronto either. So, I'm a Westerner. Sorry, I'm from Manitoba. We consider ourselves to be part of the West. And realistically, you could take the Canadian Prairie provinces, integrate that with the U.S. breadbasket states. We're the same kind of people.
Right.
The same kind of culture.
Hardworking farmers,
Yep.
and factory workers.
Right. And then you can take.
collar.
Right, and then you can take Toronto and let's throw Ottawa and Montreal into the mix. Make a railroad track or subway station from one to the next. Connect that to New York City. It's all the same kind of mentality, same kind of worldview, same kind of thinking, and that infuses your Eastern U.S. So I mean, we really are different countries.
It's hard work to be better than other people. It's really hard work. You have to keep working it. You have to keep setting new goals for yourself. Like, how am I going to be better than them in this way and in that way? Oh, I know, climate. I can be better than them in that.
Now, somebody who just popped up on your screen from New Brunswick. Awesome. You're absolutely right. That division between that French and English.
See, now the Québécois, je ne parle pas le langue français.
We're not as it's not as simple as just saying East versus West. There's just like in your country, like in your country, you've got
Trudeau,
lots of different pressures.
Trudeau, he's from his dad was from Quebec, right? Is Justin from Quebec?
Yeah,
technically.
Yeah. So
do they claim him?
The way of looking at it is that they're part of the Laurentian elites.
The what?
So I want to go back
Laurentian
to
elites
and Parliament for a few minutes here.
Yes. Back to the subject at hand.
Well, it's kind of important because something that you pointed out, a question Ron asked and you started to answer, is how much does the average person realize what's going on with the UN versus how much does what they're doing impact the average person? And we've written several articles on just election kinds of questions, and my view has been, and still mostly is, although it's starting to change, I think, that middle America, which has really nothing to do with geography, but it's a mindset, mostly wants to be left alone. And I think Western Canada is probably the same.
Just like Middle Earth.
Whatever you're doing as my next door neighbor, you do. And I'm glad for you. Just keep your grass cut and don't try to infect my kids and we'll be fine. Kind of a thing. They're working 50 weeks a year to save up for a 2-week vacation and get their kids off to college. That's their big thing. Whatever you do sexually, politically, whatever, that's fine. Just don't make me have to agree with it. That's kind of middle America. But then you have the two left coasts in the U.S.
Right, they're both left.
They're both left, and they want you to conform to whatever it is that hurts their feelings, right? So they're not for guns, so they want to eliminate guns for everybody. Well, just don't buy guns for yourself. Leave us alone.
Yeah. But you're literally Hitler when you say that.
Well, yeah. But the UN kind of is like the two left coasts. And they want you to do certain things, and they have a group called the Parliament of World Religions, which they kind of helped give birth to, that now want to be the religious ambassadors to the world for the UN.
Yep.
Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think it probably is going to happen. And they even created their own really cool outfits. Why are they doing that, Carl?
There has been an interest by religious leaders already back in the 1970s around forming within the United Nations kind of an advisory group or forming a special partnership. And I think that there's a worldview recognition that if everything is moving towards oneness, if we're moving towards this synthesis, then the religious world cannot be ignored. It has to come into that fold. In fact, more than just come into the fold, I assert that it's actually been really instrumental in making this come about. So, for an example, during World War II, it was the Federal Council of Churches, along with a number of other Christian denominations and Christian organizations that pressed hard on the State Department to create a much more robust United Nations than what we have now.
Right.
They described this as a form of international righteousness. Same thing during World War I. The League of Yeah, the League of Nations was founded, first of all, through organizations like the League to Enforce Peace, which had board members who were social gospel ministers.
You better be at peace or we're going to shoot you.
But so it's inevitable. You have to have this coalescing. And to Ron's question about, well, how much impact has there been? Golly, the last 3 years over COVID, huge. We had a common global narrative, common global agenda, common global perspective. We're still working through common protocols.
Now we're having common global heart attacks and early deaths. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's always this push. The question is, will it succeed? Will their vision succeed? So in some respects, it does. In other aspects, it doesn't. Regardless of which way it goes, I think it's really important to see it for what it is. And that goes back to that earlier part of the conversation. It has that cult-like messianic salvation argument. That's really what this boils down to. And so we have to recognize it as such and treat it as such. Yeah. Like I said, if all of a sudden, let's say the Mormons invaded your town and took over your town, you'd want to know, you'd want to have an understanding. Well, why is it then when all of a sudden all of our local planning boards and our national posture and our provincial and state postures, why does it reflect global norms and pushes global narratives? All of a sudden we're not interested.
So the author of Hebrews talks about those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. And of course, it's talking about the world. The verse before that says, since therefore the children share in the flesh and blood, he himself, Jesus, likewise partook of the same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. Of course, their slavery was to Satan, but really ultimately to sin, to being their own gods.
Right.
But one thing that they can't control as their own deities is death.
Right.
So they're obsessed with it. They're absolutely obsessed with controlling death. And fear really is the cornerstone of Babel. And we're really talking about the religion of Babel here. Babel.
We are. They're trying to bring everyone back together with one language, the language of power, as it happens.
We're back in Genesis 9 and 10 all over again. We are, it is. They were afraid of being scattered. Why? That's a good question. I'm sure there's a lot of good things to unpack there, but really, what people are afraid of now that we are all scattered, because in spite of ourselves, because of our languages and everything, now people are afraid of anything that's going to upset their security and threaten them with death, as if we can avoid it.
Well, it's interesting, as we kind of have talked around this a little bit. The UN and the Parliament of World Religions and groups like that have this idea that they know better than the average person. Klaus Schwab actually comes out and says it. Says that as one of the elites, that he is one who knows best about all the rest of us, and so we need to turn over the decision making to him and others like him. Am I wrong in pointing that out, Carl?
No, you're absolutely right. Thomas Sowell describes it as them having the vision of the anointed. They believe they're anointed. Yes. They believe their vision is what should guide humanity.
Yep, absolutely.
It's really that simple.
Their vision should guide humanity.
Right.
So, well, it's Carl. Thank you for being here, and I'm glad we were able to have you and Alex at the same time. That's kind of was a fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
So, Ron, by the way, for those who are interested, you need to go to the description below and get those two articles we're talking about. Ron, you want to walk us out of here?
I sure do. Let's give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and The Opposer. Our Mormon archives manager is Polygamous. Our liberal denominations bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, Ode to Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yoleg Pulling. Our technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham & Howe. Grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Director of privacy assurance is Wiretapping. And original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happened.
Has not yet happened.
All right, everybody. Adios.
Adios.